So the question I want to ask everyone is: we see that Esther plays a very large role in the holiday. What do I mean? We refer to the day before Purim as Tanit Esther, which is next Wednesday. Yet Esther didn't fast before Purim. She fasted. When she fasts for 3 days, as we'll see in the text in a few minutes, when she fasts for 3 days, those 3 days are actually in the month of Nisan, probably during Pesach itself. So the question we have to ask ourselves is, why is it called Tanit Esther? The second question we want to ask ourselves is, why is it called Megillat Esther? Why isn't it called Megillat Mordechai? So I think Chazal wanted us to identify with Esther. There's something about Esther that we need to connect with. There's something that happens to her that perhaps we need to go through that same transformation process or the same type of identity process as well. So if I were to ask you even, when is like the story of the Megillah? So just very quickly, I'm going to give you a 20-second synopsis of each chapter, and you tell me, where do you think, at what point the things start to get a little brighter for the Jewish people? Right? When is that point? Is it? Well, so chapter 1 is very simple. Chapter 1 is Achashverosh in his 30 year of his reign throws parties for 6 months, then he throws a local party. Then at the local party, he parades his wife Vashti. She refuses to show up, and she gets killed, beheaded, exiled, whatever the case is. She's out of the picture. Chapter 2, he realizes, oh my goodness, I need another wife. That's a beauty pageant. And at the end of that, Esther is chosen. Soon after Esther is chosen, and by the way, Mordechai says, don't tell anybody who you are, what you are, all that. At the end of chapter 2, Mordechai overhears an assassination plot to assassinate Achashverosh. He tells Esther. Esther tells Achashverosh in the name of Mordechai. Then Mordechai discovers the assassination plot. That's in the chapter 2. Chapter 3, Haman is exalted among the other ministers, among the other senators in the government, and he has a demand that everyone needs to bow down to him. Mordechai refuses to bow, which, by the way, is a topic in and of itself. Why does Mordechai actually refuse to bow? Because Mordechai refuses to bow, it's revealed to Haman that Mordechai is actually a Jew, and therefore he wants to destroy and wipe out the entire Jewish people. That is chapter 3. The end of chapter 3, the decree goes out to all of the king's horses and all the king's men, that on the 13th of Adar is destruction day. Everyone is pretty upset and distraught. Well, at least the Jews are, or there's such bad, terrible news. In chapter 4, what happens? Mordechai then decides he needs to actually take a stand, changes into pretty lousy, schleppy clothing, sacks and sackcloths and ashes, and he begins to demonstrate in front of the king's court. Esther hears about it. There's an exchange of conversation. At the end of the conversation, Mordechai tells Esther, Esther, go to your husband, Achashverosh, and plead him to have the Jewish people. Esther, by the end, finally agrees. That's the end of chapter 4. Chapter 5. Esther decides to go speak to the king. Esther speaks to the king and says, hey, buddy, guess what I want from you? I want you to come to a party tonight with Haman and I. That'll be a lot of fun. It's going to be a wild party. Lots of, whatever the case may be. Fun, great. So what ends up happening at that party? What happens at the party? Come to another party. In between the two parties, meaning at the end of that night and the next night, which was the next party, chapter 6. At the end of chapter 6, Achashverosh cannot sleep. He cannot sleep. He wakes up, very disturbed, asked to have his book of Chronicles being read to them. Lo and behold, it's a famous story that Mordechai saved the life of the king. And he was not repaid. So Achashverosh calls out the guy who he hears, walking around somewhere, Haman, how do I repay someone who does a favor for the king? Oh, this is what you should do. Thank someone for saving the king's life. Dress up like a king, act like a king, parade him like a king. And we know Achashverosh was Haman. Great, do that to Mordechai, the Jew. So Achashverosh does it begrudgingly, but he has absolutely no choice because the king is really powerful. Then, at the end of after that parading story, at the party, finally, Esther reveals the truth that Haman is out there to kill the Jewish people. Achashverosh, small exchange of words, says, hang him on the tree that I actually prepared for Mordechai. Haman is hanged, but that's not the end of the story, but that is the end of the chapter. Then what ends up happening, Esther needs to plead and say, I got one more favor to ask. Haman's dead, but there's still a problem. There's still a decree. Would you mind rescinding the decree? Achashverosh says, no can do, but I can write another letter that says the Jews could defend themselves. Interesting. Why do we need a letter for that? That's for another time. So he writes a letter, the Jews could defend themselves. And then, fast forward about 9 months, it's finally the month of Adar. On the 13th, the Jews defend themselves. The 13th of Adar is on Wednesday. We defend ourselves, and afterwards we celebrate and party. Therefore, we call the holiday called Purim. Which, by the way, why is the holiday called Purim? Because the lots play a very insignificant role in the whole story. But that's for another time as well. And that was last year's topic, or 2 years ago. I don't remember anymore.
It starts on our battery.
Low battery?
It's flashing.
That's okay, I have another one. Which is probably not charged. And we left off at the next chapter is the Jews are allowed to feed themselves. Why they're allowed to feed themselves, that's for another story. Oh, holiday called Purim, right, and now I remember. And the Jews end up celebrating, but in Shushan they need another day, in which case they need to feed themselves on the 13th and the 14th of Adar, and they could only celebrate on the 15th of Adar, hence the holiday called Shushan Purim. And on that day, either Purim or Shushan Purim, the Jews have gifts, and they celebrate, and it's a party, and everything's great, and Jewish people live, yay Jews. The last chapter of the Megillah is about attacks, and I won't get to right now. But those are essentially the entire story from chapter 1 to chapter 10. Ladies and gentlemen, I ask you a question. What point do you think do we hit rock bottom and things begin to look up for the Jewish people? What are your thoughts?
I don't think we do. Totally.
What?
I don't think we do, really.
I think we do. I think when you read the book.
Wait, 1, 2. Well, you were first.
I don't think that there is any positivity to Purim.
Nothing.
No, because at the end of the day, number one, they chose to be there when the Beit HaMikdash was being rebuilt in Jerusalem, and there was already movement in Jerusalem. Number two, at the end of the story, they're still under the leadership of an evil king who might have done one good thing, but he's still an evil king, and he was still an evil king, corrupt, and he's still whatever. And number three, like, it's the whole thing is like it's the best of a bad situation, but it's not really good because they could have been in a better situation.
Right. So the question
is the same reason why we don't say Hillel, because they didn't have their own autonomy. They didn't really they were saved, but like
it was a temporary save.
Yeah.
But the problem is like this. The problem with that theory, which was actually put forth first by Rabbi Hillel and became very popular by Rabbi Leibtag, is that that's clearly not how Chazal really understood it, because they make the day very, very celebratory.